Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 2, Chapter 10, Text 26. Nirabhidyata shishnovai prajanandamritadhinaha upastha asikamanam priyam tad ubhayashrayam. Nirabhidyata shishnovai prajanandamritadhinaha upastha asikamanam priyam tad upayashrayam. Nirabhidyata shishnovai ladies. Asikamanam priyam tat ubhayashrayam. Nirabhidyata came out. Shishnaha, the genitals. Vai, certainly. Praja, ananda, sex pleasure. Amrita artinaha, aspiring to taste the nectar. Upastaha, the male or female organ. Asit, came into existence. Kamanam, of the lustful. Priyam, very dear. Tat, that. Ubhaya ashrayam, shelter for both. Translation: thereupon, for sexual pleasure, begetting offspring, and tasting heavenly nectar, the Lord developed the genitals, and thus there is the genital organ and its controlling deity, the Prajapati. The object of sexual pleasure and the controlling deity are under the control of the genitals of the Lord. Purport: the heavenly pleasure for the conditioned soul is sexual pleasure, and this pleasure is tasted by the genitals. The woman is the object of sexual pleasure, and both the sense perception of sexual pleasure and the woman are controlled by the Prajapati, who is under the control of the Lord's genitals. The impersonalist must know from this verse that the Lord is not impersonal, for he has his genitals, on which all the pleasurable objects of sex depend. No one would have taken the trouble to maintain children if there were no taste of heavenly nectar by means of sexual intercourse. This material world is created to give the conditioned souls a chance for rejuvenation, for going back home, back to Godhead, and therefore generation of the living being is necessary for upkeep of the purpose of creation. Sexual pleasure is an impetus for such action, and as such, one can even serve the Lord in the act of such sexual pleasure. The service is counted when the children born of such sexual pleasure are properly trained in God consciousness. The whole idea of material creation is to revive the dormant God consciousness of the living entity. In forms of life other than the human form, sexual pleasure is prominent without any motive of service for the mission of the Lord. But in the human form of life, the conditioned soul can render service to the Lord by creating progeny suitable for the attainment of salvation. One can beget hundreds of children and enjoy the celestial pleasure of sexual intercourse, provided is able to train the children in God consciousness. Otherwise, begetting children is on the level of the swine. Rather, the swine is more expert than the human being, because the swine can beget a dozen piglets at a time, whereas the human being can give birth to only one at a time. So, one should always remember that the genitals, sexual pleasure, the woman, and the offspring are all related to the service of the Lord, and one who forgets this relationship in the service of the Supreme Lord becomes subjected to the threefold miseries of material existence by the laws of nature. Perception of sexual pleasure is there, even in the body of the dog, but there is no sense of God consciousness. The human form of life is distinct from that of the dog for perception of God consciousness. Well done. A little difficult to make nice commentary on this verse, but the essence is, of course, in keeping with Srimad Bhagavatam, that is propagating Bhagavat Dharma. Dharma having different meanings, but duty, or one's constitutional position, one's essence, one's very nature, Dharma. And rather than focusing on this particular feature, the broader picture is there are things of this world that people consider to be enjoyable. And Dharma is to connect that which is perceived to be enjoyable, whether it's enjoyable or not enjoyable, perceived to be enjoyable, in an act of service to the Supreme. Karma yoga is something of a dovetail. Bhakti yoga, the dovetail meaning I like, and then there's the Supreme, so let me do that which I like in connection with the Supreme. So, who's in the front seat? Me. And who's in the back seat? Krishna. Bhakti is Krishna's in the front seat, and the intention of every act, of course, this is God consciousness, or bhakti, life. Krishna's the focus. It's a major transition. Well, it's a major transition to go to God-centered life, where dovetail is the way that you live, and then it's yet a more dramatic or a transcendental transition to go from God's in the picture somewhere to pleasing the Supreme is the purpose. And so taking this particular example, something that may seem to an individual, human or other species, to be enjoyable, that there's a purpose for this enjoyableness. So the material purpose is propagation of species. Very simple. The world continues, the world goes round based on propagation of the species. If there was no propagation of species, everything was shut down. So there's propagation of the species, and there's something to ensure, even for animals or birds or fish or whatever, there's propagation of the species. And that is the act of sex. And somehow, without going to school, without being instructed, animals, birds, fish, and other species, they have a natural inclination to find that happiness and propagate the species. Human life becomes degraded or not yet elevated if the same impetus is there, just for enjoyment purposes. Now, in the human form of life, there's institutions. You like the word institution. There's procedures for sacred, so marriage, and then within marriage, some regulations. And that doesn't make it transcendental. It just makes it, not grossly sinful. Whatever, the eating, the animal propensities, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. For defending, in the beginning of Canto 1, Chapter 9, Yudhisthira is speaking about there's a procedure within the codes of Dharma for religious fighting, Dharma Yuddha. But that's not me, and so I'm a sinful man. It's not, what he was doing was adharmic. It's not adharmic for the codes of religion. It's not adharmic because Krishna was directly urging him, instructing him on both accounts. So what constitutes Dharma Yuddha? Just listening this morning to Prabhupada speaking, the different aggressors, and by name they're identified, this one, that one, the other one, the other one. And when there's killing or punishment or violence, Prabhupada was saying this morning class, Gandhi was asked, supposing your daughter, her chastity was violated right in your presence, what would you do? And he said, that Gandhi said, I remain nonviolent. I would remain nonviolent. Prabhupada didn't say too much about it, other than that's not dharmic. It's something else, stubborn or something, but it's not dharmic. It's also not natural. So that which is natural has its dharmic standards for human society. As for Dharma Yuddha, there's also dharmic procedures for sacred marriage, and within sacred marriage, the purpose, and outside of that purpose, it's not free from karmic reaction. You know, whether people know it or not, or like it or not, or follow it or not, it doesn't change the principle. So, what's the principle? There's a purpose of God to be fulfilled, and one who's conscious of the purpose of God to be fulfilled, then, and acts accordingly, that's transcendental. There's no there's no karmic reaction. Supposing, for example, there's provision within the Vedas for sacrificing a goat for those who want flesh. So that there's not if the procedures are followed by a qualified brahmana, then there's not the sin of killing. Although there's not the sin of killing, there's another loophole or technical point. A favorable result comes to the goat, or the soul of the goat, that was sacrificed, because according to scripture, that soul of the goat that's sacrificed in the proper way immediately goes in their next birth to the human form of life. So that's beneficial. You know, how many people are thinking, let me benefit this goat? That's not what they're thinking. But there's benefit for the soul of the goat. And there's no karmic reaction. However, on the other hand, mamsa, there's no karmic reaction, but one in its next life will become that animal that was sacrificed, and the soul that was the goat will have the opportunity, at least, to kill the goat. It's really complicated. So sanction within codes of religion for things that appear to somebody to be enjoyable is meant to take it from the platform of their own enjoyment to the platform of being a follower of Dharma, which means for many people that follow Dharma, Swadharma, it's elevation. And it's about me. I find some happiness instead of distress by living my life in a dharmic way. Then there's paradharma. And if swadharma is carried out in a paradharma manner, then it's not just there's elevation, but it's transcendence. There's a nice discussion about this in Krishna's talks with Sudama Brahman. I like that section of the Bhagavatam. So there's one of the moods that is exhibited by Krishna, and there's multiple. One of them is appreciating the function of spiritual master. Krishna says that when one worships the spiritual master, it's most pleasing to him. Then he goes on to say, there's 3 different categories of spiritual master. There's more than 3, but he lists 3. There's mother and father, because they give birth to the child, and therefore they're in the position of spiritual master. Then above that is one who gives diksha mantras so that one can perform rituals. And then a third, guru, is one who teaches about me. Now he's speaking to his friend, but all of a sudden, before he was worshipping him as a Kshatriya worships a Brahmin, now he's the Supreme Lord. It's just the mood moved very comfortably. It's pleasing to more. There's nothing more pleasing to me. And he lists, one can do this, that, and the other thing, and there's nothing of those things that's as pleasing to me as worship of the Guru. And then he says, of these gurus, the one that's the superlative is the one who teaches about me. And that, because that person, I invest myself in them so they can teach about me, and they're not different than me. So worshipping such a guru is worshipping me. Very interesting. So he then, in another later section, it's commentary actually, there's Swadharma and there's Paradharma. So he's indicating the Paradharma guru is superlative compared to the others that are also to be considered. So that's what Prabhupada is doing. That's what the Bhagavatam is doing, which is in things of this world like sex pleasure that's there in the lower species as well. How is that to be handled? And the pleasure of the personality of Godhead. Now that's high to do anything. Let's say, cook for Krishna, and then you make your offering for Krishna, and then you take the prasadam of Krishna, and it's all about Krishna enjoyed very nicely the cooking that was done. Commonly we don't think like that. I mean, a transcendentalist may think like that, but commonly we don't think like that. It's nice prasadam, or it's not nice prasadam. It's like, it's my tongue and my enjoyment. It's not the same. So bhakti is very elevated, and bhakti is very powerful. It can relieve one altogether of the implications and complications of material existence. More so than Swadharma, Paradharma can do that. Bhagavatam is teaching us, Savai Pungsang Paro Dharmo, Yato Bhaktir Adhoksaje, Ahaituki Pratyataya Yatva Suprasidati. So all of this just within, this description of the universal form unfolding in this way, that way, so that living entities have the facility. They have facility because the Lord provides the facility, and the Lord is the actual enjoyer of everything. And transcendental life is to recognize and to feel that, to experience it. It's a very high place, God consciousness. Let's see if there's some discussion.
Can I ask a question? When somebody follows dharma as per the scriptural injunctions, so like for example, the example that you gave is killing a goat in front of Kali, so still they're going to get karma for that.
Well, it's delicate. There's not sin, but there's karma.
So if somebody doesn't follow that, they do in unrestricted way, that will be like a vikarma. I mean, I was just trying to compare vikarma and karma. So because even if somebody does follow dharmic principles as per the Vedas, still there is a reaction to that. Maybe not in a like a vikarma, we are completely against the scriptural injunctions. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, in many cases, the dharma leads to elevation, to a higher birth, heavenly planets, etc. So that's not, there's karma, but it's not sin. It leads to a pious punya karma. There's consequences for punya karma.
Yes.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I find myself to be very dutiful. So when I hear such statements that it is duty, obviously, of a parent to properly train kids in God consciousness. What I've noticed with my children or younger youth is they find this sense of community. They like kirtan, but any rules or regulations, they're not so inclined to follow. So I want to understand.
I've noticed too. So
what is, my role or my duty to further?
You put the what do you call it? Royal carpet before them, but they have to walk on it. You can't force them to walk on it. You create an atmosphere, and then they're making choices. You can't take away they're making choices. If you try to do that, it's not going to work. They'll be pushed back, if not immediately, later. So that's not the procedure. You create a chamber, the right atmosphere, and in a loving mood, and you encourage. And it's, they're going to make choices. Be sure that whatever on the spiritual platform atmosphere is provided for them, it's a permanent asset. They may today do something different, but it's, the asset is with them. So you're, as being dutiful, back to your question, you create the atmosphere and provide the facility, encourage. And recognize, sometimes and sometimes. And that's not it's not in your control. It's not actually what your duty is to control. That's not your duty. Your duty is to train, and provide the opportunity. And then they can say yes or no, or let me think about it. This is going on. It's not a surprise. It's conditioning. It's very wonderful when the pyramid of how many people have devotional inclination out of all the people. Very rare. That's just the statistic confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, but it's also observable. Okay, so know what your duty is, and you do your duty, and then you can say the result is up to Krishna, or they're going to make their choices. Is that right?
Yes, Maharaj. So then I should be satisfied, I feel, with whatever I'm providing. Sometimes I feel like...
The satisfaction is samsadhir haritoshanam. That's the satisfaction. It's the consciousness of trying to satisfy Hari makes one satisfied. So the focus, I'll say it again, the focus is, the satisfaction is that Krishna should be pleased. And the result of the outcome of that effort where Krishna is to be pleased may be whatever it's going to be. Make it easier on yourself and just say, supposing somebody is a book distributor and they go out to distribute books. Is the success that they distributed a lot of books, or the success is their consciousness was that Hari should be pleased? Because there's some devotees that are really good, but they're not so devotional. They're good salespeople. They're gifted. You follow? Yes. So same with parenting. The satisfaction is the bhakti behind the effort of being the mother of children. And the more that's there, the more it's attractive. And the more long-lasting is going to be that parenting effect, because purity is the force. So your focus should go to the purpose for which you're doing the parenting as opposed to the result. And that's where the satisfaction comes, or doesn't come.
Thank you.
Bhakti is subtle, but it's our life. And people that are, results oriented miss the point. And even if something nice happens, it's not about Krishna, it's about me. Anyone else? Online?
This is from Ankit Purohit Prabhu. What should one do if one does not have the guidance of a spiritual master?
Pray to Krishna that he'll send you a spiritual master. And meanwhile, you're guided by the scripture and guided by Supersoul and those persons around you who are wise and you look up to. But you pray to Krishna for such good fortune.
Maharaj, you were speaking about Swadharma and Parodharma, and we read that devotees who are self-realized, they can just do Parodharma. The Swadharma is not, because they're not on the bodily platform. So my question is that as devotees advance, then their body and their soul, sort of the connection loosens, so to say. They're less, you could say, less in their body. So as a devotee advances, does the Swadharma, it's not a night, it's not a switch, it's not a day or night thing. So as they advance, is it basically less important in terms of what their Swadharma is?
Is what less important?
Their Swadharma becomes less and less important.
Well, it's subordinate to. But, less important, if the understanding of less important means subordinate to, then fine. But, all these discussions from the story with Sanatana Goswami is how important is standard etiquette. That's important. That's important. It's important. Subordinate to. And from our Rupa Goswami's teachings, they are to be followed carefully. Unless it interferes with one's spontaneous devotion to Krishna, then it's fine to leave it to the side. But other than that, it's very important. For different reasons. It sets example. It's a big one. It's like what Krishna is saying to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Your Swadharma as a Kshatriya, you do it even after you perfect. To set an example. So well, what if I may need to do my Swadharma now because I'm not perfect, but when I'm perfect, what about when I'm perfect? You do your Swadharma when you're perfect. Because it sets an example for others. People in general are not aligned to pure devotion. People in general are aligned to good conduct, if they're in the mode of goodness. And so a transcendentalist will be very concerned about etiquette and Swadharma in general. They're setting an example for the broad population, and very few are even interested. What to speak of if they're interested, if they can understand and detect the paradharma mood of some Vaishnav. So they do both. It's subordinate. But it's important.
As a follow-up to that question, I was particularly thinking about like Srila Prabhupada when he gave Brahminical initiation. Then, and you're mentioning the three types of gurus also. In one sense, making someone Brahmana was meaning that they would teach others about Krishna. But also, in another sense, Brahmana is the nature of a Brahmana acting on that. So is it that, and Srila Prabhupada gives that example of Mercury, turning bell metal into gold. So was Srila Prabhupada, and is it our duty as devotees, once we are devotees, to act more on you do the Swadharma more of a Brahmana, and the other Swadharmas will gradually, will still be there, but being a carpenter or being a plumber may not be so important anymore, and really not reflected in your nature, because now that spiritual aspect is so much more important.
It sounds like you're giving a lesson, not just asking a question, but I'm not sure that I agree with the lesson.
No, that the question is, does the devotee's actual nature change? Or is it just that...
Not necessarily.
Gradually.
Not necessarily. I mean, the refinement of culture may change, but it's not that, somebody... It's that just, I'm thinking of Prabhupada's disciple Paramananda, he was in New Vrindavan. He couldn't get along with Kirtananda, so he was given Gitanagri, and he did the thing. He was with the oxen and made movies about plowing. We don't need tractors, and his activity didn't change. It became refined, but his psychophysical nature didn't necessarily switch from being inclined to cow protection and plowing the fields with bulls. It was a Vaishya behavior, a conduct or occupation. So that's. Let me think of some other example. That's, somebody that's a Kshatriya, a king. They don't stop being a Kshatriya. Yudhishthira was perfectly truthful, etc., but he was also a powerful hero. He wasn't as powerful as Arjuna and Bhima, but he was a powerful. So he Prataparudra. He was powerful. He was soft, but he was powerful. Otherwise, how could he maintain his kingdom? That was his duty. It was his nature, but also very soft. If my understanding for what you're asking is, as one becomes a nature, if one becomes elevated in paradharma, does one's swadharma change? Not only become less important, but it can just transform. It can transform. It can transform, but that's not the sign that now he's become. A great Vaishnava is his psychophysical nature changed. Is that on the topic?
Yes. So then, when we say that now someone is a Brahmana, they have received Brahmanical initiation, then we're speaking in terms of spiritual relationship with Brahman.
Yeah, it's that whole topic for me is gray. It's not black and white. What does it mean to be a Brahmana when your psychophysical nature is plow the fields? Or your psychophysical nature is be a businessman? What does it mean? Or, because Brahmana initiation is to be given to those who exhibit the qualities of a Brahmana. Or conversely, one who's born but doesn't have the qualities, that's not a Brahmana. Brahmana is by quality. So when there's quality, what does that mean? It's gray to me. So some persons are administrators, some persons are teachers. So they have a function within society that's according to their nature. Some are, often there's a mix. But being a Brahmana means, yes, you know it as Brahman, And so therefore, it's expected, if you're going to know what is Brahman, or a Brahmana is to know what the scripture says. But then how do you act? Psychophysical nature. That not gets changed out. So on the one hand, but on the other hand, a Vaishnava, to me, it's not crystal. It's not so clear. It probably should be. I probably should think more deeply about it. But I've tried, and it doesn't go very far. So a Vaishnava is above Brahmana. So one becomes a Vaishnava by Diksha, by a life that's dedicated to pleasing Krishna. That's a Vaishnava. And confirmed by Diksha. Then what's a Brahmana? What's a reconfirmation? What exactly? Specific to, one's swadharma, I may have the occupation, an authorized, natural occupation of being something, such and such. You want to add something, Premananda? Want to ask something?
So then, why we have this? We have certain criteria for second initiation.
Yes, we do.
And we can clearly see, even someone who is not at all experienced like me, that
Not at all what?
I can see that some of the candidates they would have fulfilled our requirement, but you can clearly see that their inclinations are different. Even our own inclinations are a little bit different. Then we are not
even our own what?
Brahminical. It's not Brahminical really 100%. But we have that criteria. Whoever fills the criteria.
That's different. You're adding a layer on his question. The requirements for Brahminical initiation in ISKCON is there's a checklist. Just for your information, you may be interested to find out more about this, just as an administrator. In Chandrasekhar Prabhu, who's a graduate of the Gurukula in Mayapur, and a disciple of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he just sent out something that's been refined and refined and refined. In China, it's a new standard in China, just recent. He wrote some nice letter. Some devotees, this and that, some gurus, they require Bhakti Shastri. Into all of that's nice. In China, it's going to be a requirement from this day going forward that they have to take a course that he's going to teach, and the curriculum was created, that teaches quality. Now, that's not a standard outside of China that what they have as standards in Melbourne, and it's like, it's really high. It's really high. You got to be. It takes like 10 years to jump over that bar they have over there. Anyway, but his approach is character, and et cetera, et cetera. So if you're interested, you can ask him for the curriculum, and it's nice. No, it's nice. No, that's China. So it doesn't matter who the guru is. The guru is not to accept a disciple unless they've completed this requirement, which is understand what the character of a Brahmana is. It's nice. But that's the ISKCON standard of Brahminical initiation, which isn't what his question is.
Can I?
Yeah.
So that again is another problem, because when we put together we just took certain only very limited additional things from the Melbourne.
Yes.
Because we cannot do all that.
Yes.
But about this Vaishnava etiquette, for example, is something we felt it will help the devotees. And
It's more than it helps.
yeah, so we added that and one other thing or whatever. Now, the latest I heard from GBC is that because it looks like every temple is doing their own thing, and so now GBC is requesting everyone to go back to just what Srila Prabhupada asked for. You know, in the disciples course, they have fundamental basic things. If a candidate fulfills those things, and then
the alternative is they just passed something. I mean, this is going to happen in China. Now we're getting into ISKCON administration. They're into it. He and Giridhari Swami are the GBC, and they're layering something on other than what you said the GBC is now deciding. And they can do that. They're doing it, and they need to do it because there aren't temples. And over here we have temples, and people get Brahminical initiation. Now they feel entitled, and they do things that aren't Brahminical.
So even though I really appreciate what you said about the training that is given in China. So if I have to go back to reduce, taking out even one or two extra things we put in there, and then we still need to train the devotees properly to get them to go somewhere. Like yesterday you mentioned about replacing dysfunctionality with functionality. I really appreciate.
You relate to that now?
No, I was just thinking, asking you, like all of these things, we can see that whether spiritual life or whether it is administration in the temple or whatever, there is different levels of dysfunctionality, and it has to be somehow made functional.
Yes.
And all of this is also part of that.
And a big part of the functionality is Vaishnava etiquette. I'm thinking, this conversation is helping me to think more about when I read that little, Chandrasekhar Prabhu sent it out to all the gurus that go to China or are involved with China preaching. I'm thinking, I don't have to accept somebody's, president's initiation, recommendation for initiation. That's okay, but I have to say yes because the temple president said they're now authorized. I may say, I want something, a layer something else on. Me, not, you,
Yes.
but me. Or So I'm thinking I want to get a copy of that curriculum that he's going to be personally teaching. And I'm thinking to make that as a requirement, because it's just a further refinement, because what Prabhupada gave us, Prabhupada didn't say, it wasn't a rule that second initiates must have Bhakti Shastri. It wasn't a rule. It's something he wanted, but it wasn't a rule. So I'm not prepared to accept somebody for second initiation that doesn't know the philosophy. And how do you certify? Minimally, they've been certified. It doesn't mean that they're not going to make this anyway. It's just it's me layering something on what Prabhupada said. From the GBC, everything's all over the place these days. Yeah. I don't have to accept a recommendation if I don't want to. Okay?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
So I'll write, and then, then he's going to personally teach it. And he's asking, I'll go back and read it again. He's asking that in China, don't initiate somebody unless they've, like the IDC. So that's an ISKCON rule. That's not something Prabhupada gave, it's an ISKCON rule. It's an ISKCON rule. It's not something Prabhupada gave. I'm repeating myself purposely. So, I'm thinking this is something nice. Then who's going to teach it? In his case, he's going to teach it. He's already started teaching it. So, get the curriculum and see if somebody wants to be responsible in different places to teach it. You know, as long as within reason. Somebody's in Timbuktu, then they may not be able to take it. But things online these days, it's doable if somebody's in Timbuktu. All right, so anything else? One more online, and then we're going to end because it's getting dragged out. Look what you started.
This is from Kanakabja Prabhu.
From whom?
Kanakabja Prabhu, the priest here.
Okay.
He is asking from Bhagavad Gita 3:25, I think. Swadharma nidhanam sreya paradharma bhaya bhaya. If you have time, can you please explain this, Maharaj? Shall I read the translation? So it is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Distraction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties. For to follow another's path is dangerous.
What's the question? He's reading a verse in a purport.
He's asking to explain.
Oh. You want to explain this one? Give him the microphone. I put you in the hot seat.
There's many different types of duties. There's varnashram dharma. There's dharmas based on our varna. There's dharmas based on our ashrams, and these dharmas are there when we do them as a service to Krishna. They're there for us to become purified through performing those dharmas. So even it may appear that I'm doing my service, I'm doing my dharma, and it's to us and to others, and I may feel that we're doing it faultily, that we are not good at this, and this is not what I should do. In fact, if I do something else which is not my part of my varna or my ashram, then I'll do it better. But Krishna is saying, no, keep doing, you should still do this because this is my path of purification. This is how I get purified.
Okay, I like it. I mean, it gets into the Swadharma, and how does Swadharma have its interaction or connection with Paradharma. But the Swadharma is there to purify us, to make us more eligible towards the mode of goodness and more eligible as a Vaishnava. Swadharma helps one become a Vaishnava. I mean, that's the objective. Vishnu is to be pleased by our Swadharmas, or Varna and Ashram duties, and purification is needed. Okay. Srila Prabhupada.